They said not to lease. I did anyway. It's kind of weird to think about how I was gearing up for a legal battle with my last employer that ultimately went nowhere, and now I'm leasing a truck. Went from local to OTR, kind of a big shit, but if you want to know more about that, just ask and you shall receive. Okay, so ultimately, why would somebody decide to lease a truck when so many people on the internet are actually talking against it? You know, there's so many horror stories. Why would somebody still become determined to do so? Well, I'm going to tell you why. It had to do with a few things. One, I just didn't want to be an employee anymore. I want to be the captain of my own ship. And two, my financial situation at the time is what led me to doing the lease purchase process in the first place. But I'll be going into detail on that part because I know you guys are going to want to understand the logic behind why I still chose to. So ultimately what happened was I was leaving my last job because of an injury I got. And I decided, you know what, might as well just be the captain of the ship, and I'm going to see what I need to do that. One of my friends was telling me to just save up to put a down payment on a truck or go halves on a truck. But ultimately, I just did not have the funds to do so because of the situation at my last employer resulted in my pay going down. I was having to dip into credit cards and I had no savings left. So the concept of just purchasing a truck and self-dispatching wasn't an option, but trust me, I did want to do that because my credit was also destroyed. Even the SBA said no. Well, not the SBA, but the lenders they pick. So at that point, the only option I had was, well, I'm just going to go into leasing. I mean, that seems to be a way into it. Why don't I just do that? So then I started researching about it. And then I realized that a lot of people really have a ton of negative things to say about it. It seems almost unanimous, but I did notice a few things. So the first few things I noticed is that it didn't matter what anyone said. They were all saying the exact same things about every single company. So I thought, is every single person having this issue? Is it the same across the board? That doesn't logically make any sense. You mean to tell me nobody's having a positive experience? So I decided to seek those people out to hear what they had to say and compare it to the naysayers, which seemed to be an overwhelming majority. So that led me to 5 lease owners across 2 different companies, Prime and CRST, which ultimately were the 2 companies I was comparing. So the first person I noticed, her name is Jasmine, but she goes by SlimePack392. And the video I'm showing you on screen was her discussing her experience with the Prime lease, and she actually showed her settlements, and she started talking about things like revenue, things like taxes, something that many of the naysayers weren't talking about. And that's actually gonna lead into something I'm gonna dive more into in just a minute, but more so like the difference between the company driver and the lease owner or truck owner mentality. There seems to be a striking difference in how people speak. The next one, she goes by Roadrun Anaya. Her name is Shania, video up here. She actually was discussing the overall benefits she was having with Prime, but she actually discussed the overall benefits she had with Prime, the experience she was having with the truck. So hers was very general, it wasn't like really specific. The next one, excuse me, I'm reading my notes here, is a guy who goes by Trucking with Rex, putting it up on the screen. He actually is in the tanker division, and I liked his video because he was specifically discussing 2 things. One of them was the percentage of freight pay that Prime pays, and then also the volatility of being an owner in trucking. This spoke volumes because when you're in trucking or in any industry, it doesn't matter, trucking, you could be in fitness, you could be in life insurance. It's never consistent, and you have amazing ups and terrible downs. But when you look at the averages, if you're doing everything you're supposed to do, you should be either slightly above or well above the national average for other people in the same position. The volatility of business is something I have a lot of experience with, working and training under other owner-operators who experience that volatility. So the next driver, his YouTube channel, it goes by Vaga Made Me. I apologize, I didn't look up his name, but I'll post a screenshot up here and then link it in the description. By the way, all the videos I'm screen capping, they're in the description. So to not beat a dead horse, I'm gonna stop saying it. But he actually had more of the perspective of discipline, and that's why it spoke to me, because in one video he talks about, if you want to lease a truck, are you the kind of person to blow your entire paycheck as soon as you get it? And that really spoke volumes to me because I like to study finance for fun. I study financial discipline, I listen to podcasts, I read books, and I've learned a lot of these lessons the hard way. So ultimately that is something that really stuck out to me. The last one, she goes by Courtney, and I could not find the video she discussed, but I'll screen cap one that was really important that led to me choosing Prime in the first place. One of the major red flags she pointed out, but ultimately her experience with CRST was pleasant, and she discussed something similar to what Vaga Made Me said, which was you know, when people say negative things, it makes you wonder how they're running their business or how they're spending their money. I know I'm paraphrasing. It's been almost about a year since I've seen that video, and I'd have to watch quite a few of them in order to find it, but I will link to her video, then you can use that to check out her channel. So the one thing I noticed, so like, what was the point? I alluded to this like about a minute or two ago, but basically the point was that the perspective they were giving was more so of understanding volatility, understanding business, and understanding things like taxes and budgeting. And that was the biggest thing I noticed the naysayers weren't talking about. Okay, currently editing the video. Just real quick, I'm not trying to discredit people who've had bad experiences with leases. I'm very well aware that the vast majority of companies are predatory, so don't come after me for that one. Back to the video. It started to look like they were expecting to just work like company drivers and just make a lot more money. And there was one nail in the coffin I saw in the form of a YouTube comment that made me decide that I'm just going to do this. And, you know, I hate to be Mr. Negative, but it's probably one of the dumbest things I've seen in a while. But if I could find it, I'll screen cap it. But somebody said that Prime told me I was gonna make $1,700 to $1,800 a week leasing with Prime. I had a $3,000 week, and then the next week I made $1,100. And he said, yeah, I'm gonna be gone. And then I thought, wait a minute, do you not understand the average? And that's a $2,050 average. That's more than they said you would make. So that comment just didn't make sense. And ultimately, that when I saw it, I said, okay, that's it, I'm doing this. And this caused me to really, really dwell upon, I've seen videos about this and it's been beaten to death, but like the owner versus the company driver mindset. It's not that one is bad or one is better than the other, but you can't utilize one mindset with the other. For example, as a company driver, nothing wrong with that. We need company drivers. But ultimately, if you want more consistent pay, you don't want to deal with the volatility, you want to have benefits provided for you, there's nothing wrong with that. I suggest you stick to being a company driver, because as soon as you become either a lease owner or you want to fully self-dispatch and deal with the brokers and load boards yourself, and you're willing to embrace the volatility, then by all means you should do that, because you're going to perform better there. But if you have the company driver mindset, you want that stability, do not embrace ownership. It doesn't translate well. If you're thinking about it, I recommend starting as a company driver and just learning how to budget your money. I got videos coming up on that, so make sure to turn that notification bell on. But you're gonna experience a lot of volatility and a lot of severe down curves that are gonna make you question everything. Like for example, this polar vortex that caused me and my co-driver to have to experience 5 13-hour delays within a period of 2 weeks. I had a negative paycheck after that. The following paycheck was amazing, but you see how that works. Okay, now that that's out of the way, how did I choose between Prime and CRST? There was actually a few points and one major red flag that made me decide with Prime instead. So the first thing I did was lean into my knowledge of lease purchasing. I've actually worked in other industries where leases were an option, and it's really just a restricting financing option. But ultimately, that's all it is it's a form of financing for people with no or just terrible credit. So ultimately, once I decided to start looking at companies, I started to see the companies that the naysayers were discussing. Now, for the sake of this video and the fact that I am incorporated as OTRF Transport, I'm not gonna say anything possibly disparaging about other companies. So I'm just gonna leave their names out, but ultimately it boiled down to Prime and CRST because of the 5 YouTubers I was talking about. The first thing I wanted to look at was the rate that they paid the drivers. And Prime paid 72% to lease owners and CRST paid 70%. As of the recording of this video, by the time you're watching this, it might be different. The next one was freight consistency. I noticed that like when I was reading a lot of articles, the drivers that were with Prime versus CRST, they noted that the freight was a little bit more consistent, so there was less downtime versus with CRST, it was a little more inconsistent. Drivers were complaining about a lot of downtime. I actually trained at CRST back in 2022, and my driver trainer, Tim, great guy, we actually had tons of downtime in between loads, and a lot of times our time was just really wasted. And the last point that I was looking for was essentially lease completion rates. The amount of drivers that were completing their leases and either starting their own fleets and keeping their tractors, or just signing new leases, because some people really like the freedom. They don't care about the volatility, they like having their truck, and they don't mind giving it back and just getting that bonus. Like that's the career path they chose. And more people were doing that with Prime. So this is what led me to choosing Prime. Now, if you remember, I actually alluded to a major red flag with CRST that I mentioned. And I know I mentioned not talking about companies or mentioning disparaging names, but ultimately, because it got legal with them, I am saying something that is 100% true. You can look this up. I ended up receiving a check for a class action lawsuit for some pay discrepancies that occurred while I was training there. This was around between March and May of 2022 when I was doing the driver training program there. And that was ultimately why I decided, okay, I'm just not gonna go there. So I chose Prime and I decided to go this zero down lease option, and I alluded to this near the beginning of the video when it came to my financial situation. When I couldn't self-dispatch, when I couldn't just purchase my own truck with traditional financing or buy it outright. I didn't know anybody with money. Like my war market, that's what they call it in life insurance, like your surrounding community, like family, friends. Financially, there just wasn't a lot of strength for me to depend on, so I had to do the zero down lease option. And I did it for a very specific reason. Is actually what I'm gonna call my specific entry point. I didn't want to just be a zero down lease owner with Prime and just keep signing new leases. I actually have the aspirations to build my fleet. And in doing so, I was able to incorporate my LLC, run revenue through my LLC, and as of recording this, I'm going to be filing taxes under my LLC for the first time, which I can then take to Freightliner, the SBA, maybe another bank that offers equipment financing, and show them, look, this is the revenue that I've generated. These are my settlements. These are my tax returns. I'm actually generating revenue. This is a real entity. I'm not just asking for, six figures for no reason. Like, you need to have proof to take to them. And in doing so, that's gonna allow me to purchase my next tractor and have a driver that I have waiting to get started. And it's gonna be under my own authority with one of my friends who actually is a very good, very experienced dispatcher who is, it seems like he's more excited than I am. But ultimately, this is what I had to do in order to establish myself as an entity and start generating revenue and building credit so I could do this. I literally had no other option, otherwise I would have. Look, so ultimately what I recommend lease purchasing, it really depends on the type of mindset you're gonna come with it. Are you capable of being financially disciplined? Are you capable of budgeting? Are you capable of protecting yourself financially when things go south? Because you don't get PTO, you don't have your checks already taxed for you, you don't get a refund at the end of the year. Like I have a wife and children, I'm able to claim them on my taxes, but last year I got credits, this year I'm just getting deductions. So there's a big difference, there's a transition there. Ultimately, if you do like stability, you like getting your benefits, and you're fine with that, then just do that. If you have that type of mindset, I don't recommend ownership. You'll have a bad experience. But ultimately, if you do decide to lease, it can actually be a good pathway to building yourself up, starting your own fleet. And I don't mean just leasing more trucks with your company. Use it as an entry point to get your own trucks with better financing terms so you can increase your profit margins, because you now have lower payments over a longer period of time, which means you take home more money and you can lease it onto Prime or CRST for some reason, or do what I'm gonna do and eventually self-dispatch. But other than that, just make sure you turn on the notification bell. I plan on dropping a lot more helpful videos. Other than that, I am George, founder of OTRF Transport, and take care. Stay safe out there.